Urinmanamida. Long time no see. So I'm back for the second parts of my presentation, but again, thank you to Dr. Kyung for that wonderful overview of 3D VNAND. The second portion of my presentation this afternoon is going to talk in more detail about Samsung's SSD leadership. So we will do a deeper dive into the SSD space now. So if we start out by just looking at a very macro level of what the SSD market looks like, in 2014 it's about 15 million terabytes. That's a lot of NAND. 75% of that is comprised by the PC market. What's interesting is if you look to 2018, we're looking at almost 6 times larger from a market standpoint to almost 90 million terabytes. So look at the distribution now, right? We're starting to see more inroads into the data center area as we expect that segment to pick up a lot of the demand moving forward. So going back to the PC industry and drilling down here on some key trends that we're following here, that really fall into that sweet spot of some of these SSD and 3D VNAND value propositions will lie. Portability, higher performance, and of course, never have enough higher capacity. So from a portability standpoint, it's obvious if you just look around the room at the different form factors of laptops that people are starting to use nowadays. Gone from the conventional laptop to the ultra-thin recently, now to this convertible, detachable, clamshell, these more hybrid type devices, which begs the question, where does the laptop end and where does the tablet begin? Commensurate with these changes, longer battery life is the expectation. We used to talk in the US about being able to go coast to coast on a single charge, right? 3 to 5 hours. Now you're talking about that flight that y'all came on if you came from the US or overseas. You could actually use your laptop that entire flight to blog about your experience at the Samsung Global Summit. So very exciting, 10 hours of battery life. So let's think about high performance now, right? Lots of multitasking, many different apps open at the same time, some games, some spreadsheets, some PowerPoint, some other files. The problem is CPU performance is scaling nicely with Moore's Law. HDD performance is not. That gap is widening and becoming significant, right? About 100x in 2010, perhaps 10,000x by 2020. This obviously is ripe for disruption and requires something new from a storage perspective. So let's think about higher capacity. 4K, 2K TVs, these are right around the corner. If you guys were at CES, you started to get a glimpse of the immersive experience that these TVs represent. And these high megapixel cameras and even smartphones are starting to offer now. All of this is putting additional constraint or additional pressure on SSD or storage capacity, and accordingly, SSD capacity is moving up from 169 gigabytes this year, potentially a CAGR of 30% per year for the next 4 or 5 years. So let's now look at the combination of these two PC and SSD trends. Flexible and efficient. One of the inherent beauties of NAND flash architecture is that it is form factor agnostic, right? It doesn't have to be in a 2.5. We've actually taken the size down dramatically into what we call an M.2 form factor. It's like a stick of gum, right? Just barely bigger than a quarter. More than a 99% reduction in volume compared to legacy storage platforms or form factors. And then of course lower power. You're talking about 1/3 the power consumption versus a hard drive. Perfect again for that aspect of portability. Now let's think about built for speed, right? The hard drive devices are really constrained by that physical limitation of that SATA interface. SSD, NAND flash rather, is actually outgrowing the SATA interface as we move into the PCIe space. And accordingly, we're looking at about a 20x improvement in mixed pattern performance. This is a mix of reads, writes, sequential, random, versus a hard drive, a 20x improvement. Again, perfect for high performance applications. Cost effective. We've gone from a 2-bit era, now we've moved recently into a 3-bit era. Every time we can continue to take cost out of the equation, obviously sets us up for more widespread consumer adoption as well as server and data center adoption, and this also allows us to make much higher capacity points, which are very important for many applications. So let's talk about some PC optimized SSDs now. So I want to share with you a couple of industry firsts that Samsung has had within the PC market, taking into account this M.2 form factor, 3-bit advancements, and then also PCIe. So let's talk about the first 3-bit SSD for PC. So this was the 840 and the 840 EVO. These launched 2 years and 1 year ago, respectively. And you can see those benchmark scores are actually extremely robust, especially when you consider a lot of these were being compared to 2-bit product. My favorite quote here is from Tom's. I don't know if that writer's in the audience. It's very clever. More than evolution, cache me if you can. So that's one of my favorites. But the key is over 10 million shipments worldwide of 3-bit SSD from our branded product division. So this has, again, been a very, very successful product launch for us. Now let's talk about the first PCIe for SSD. So we're taking it up a notch. Last year, first generation client PCIe in 2013, 4-lane, AKI protocol. Second generation this year, client PCIe for 2014. That's NVMe based. This is going to be the next step in this disruptive evolution of NAND-based storage. This is my favorite quote. I can't wait for Samsung to release a retail version of the XP941, says Anantech. Well, I can't wait either, so we're all very excited about that. So let's briefly go over the benefits of that PCI interface. So from a SATA perspective to a PCIe, in SATA, 1 lane, 600 megabytes per second. PCIe, 4 lanes, up to 4,000 megabytes per second. As you can see, that gives you about a 7x improvement in bandwidth. Couple that with about a 3x improvement in latency, that's where you get those blazing fast speeds. Put those two things together, look at the benchmark results, about 1.5x on a certain benchmark when you compare SATA versus PCIe. So again, very disruptive performance. Now let's look at the first NVMe for PC. So what we want to say here is coming soon. So we're very excited to be working with our key OEM partners on having that first NVMe-based PC. You can see some of the performance specs that we're looking at the drive level, 2 to 3x versus SATA from a sequential read and write. Random read and write about 10 to 30%. And look at that idle power reduction, minus 80%. So again, back to that portability. The other thing I have to point out is we were very happy about receiving in Q1 of this year that L1.2 low power certification for NVMe. And this is really all about propagating the use of NVMe. And we did this in conjunction with our partners on the chipset and OS ecosystem. So let's talk briefly now about some data center industry trends. 3 key trends we want to pay attention to. Number 1, cloud service. There's that TCO acronym again, total cost of ownership. And third, virtualization. All very, very important within this space. So think about cloud services for a minute, right? It's all about optimizing that cloud service. This is that cloud computing is that platform for which all of these different devices are connected on a worldwide basis. And again, these have to be continuously optimized to drive that lightning fast internet, that reaction time that you're expecting with your mobile device, and also to drive cost out of the equation. So performance, power, and cost. Last year, SSDs started to make tremendous inroads, but really for temporary storage, improved performance, maybe some caching. In 2014, though, we're actually starting to see SSDs for persistent storage. So this is kind of a key catalyst here for growth moving forward. And as you can see, our expectation is the SSD attach rate in a data center is going to start to increase dramatically here in the coming years. Down paging. Thank you. So let's talk now a little bit more about our total cost of ownership, or TCO. So if you look at that data center management cost, again, there's the CapEx, this is what you spend on the data center, then there's the OpEx. OpEx is a lot of that is power related, about 31% power related. If we drill down on that power management cost, you can see that about 17% of that is related to the storage, either SSD or HDD, plus the cooling. Now remember, SSDs, those things are running with virtually no heat. So the cooling requirements they have is dramatically lower than what a 15 or even a 10K hard drive would have. I'm going to try this again. All right. Virtualization, another key trend in the industry right now. Again, traditional architecture, very simple. Application, single OS, single physical resource. Now with virtualization, multiple applications, multiple operating systems over a virtual machines rather, sharing that physical resource. So again, that shared storage pool is now being amplified and hit much harder with this heavy, we call large-scale transactions. Lots of different data requests, lots of transactions, lots of volume, same finite amount of storage. So the key here is virtualization is going to drive both performance as well as big storage requirements. Both of these are right in the sweet spot of the SSD value proposition that we're going to be talking about today. So let's talk about data center SSD trends now for a moment. First one, high performance, right? Can't get enough. And really the key here, it's all about that transition from SATA to Nvme from an interface perspective. As we mentioned, from a bandwidth perspective, about 7x increase. Latency about 1/3, so much faster, much better bandwidth. We like to say that NV really allows, or it unleashes, the true performance capability of NAND flash. There's no more bottleneck when we move from SATA into the Nvme PCIe space. Cost effectiveness. Of course, cost effectiveness is always going to be key, especially for widespread adoption, right? 3-bit SSD is going to be core to that. Let's look at this case study example. We take an HDD-based server, which is on the left, right? About 40,000 concurrent users. About 40,000. Power consumption, you can see there, and then the server quantity, about 10,000 servers to service those 40,000 users. Now, if we take the hard drive out, same server, same cost, and replace that with an SSD, you get about a 60% increase in the number of concurrent users that server can support. At the same time, you're going to have a 12% decrease in power and actually a 22% decrease in the amount of servers that you need to deploy. So again, this is where we like to talk about that TCO. NAND is extremely disruptive because it hits on all these pain points. So SSDs and data centers will bring significant TCO reduction. So building more on that power reduction, again, think about that stack of 20 hard drives, and the same performance can be gained or realized with a single SSD that uses 1/60th of the power. So it's really not even fair anymore, right? So we like to say 1/60th the power with the same performance is really beyond comparison. And that's really where we're going with this. So now let's take a look at some of the data center optimized SSDs that Samsung has been offering. Many world's firsts or industry first SSDs in the data center market, capitalizing on these key trends of NVMe, 3-bit, and low power. So the first of which is the first 3-bit SSD for data center. Again, we launched our first data center SSD in 2012. That was 2-bit. This year we're looking at the 3-bit launch. Again, very excited about that. We call that the TCO optimized 3-bit SSD for data center. And here's the interesting thing. TLC, which is 3-bit based SSD, no trouble ranking near the top of the pack ahead of even some MLC based competitors. That's how confident we are of this new technology. We're actually also very proud of this. First NVMe now for servers and data centers. We worked with our partners at Dell, launched the world's first NVMe server in March of this year. We pulled this ad right off of their website. They're showing about a 15x faster performance with NVMe compared to a 10K SAS hard drive. And again, we actually were able to achieve the world's first NVMe interoperability certification. This is something that the University of New Hampshire drives, and it's really to proliferate and make sure that NVMe technology and ecosystem continues to propagate in the future. We like to call the SM953 the first power-optimized NVMe for the data center. You can look at the specs there. We're taking that down to active power of about 6 watts. That's anywhere from a 40 to a 75% reduction and power for what we like to call optimized TCO. And again, that's the world's first Nvme Integrators 1.1 interoperability certification. So we're very aggressive in pushing, again, that ecosystem to make sure that the Nvme is deployed as widely as possible. And now let's talk about the continued leadership that we will have with 3D VNAND. Again, as we just saw, there's 4 core benefits of VNAND. More capacity, we're saying 2x and beyond. Initially just 2x, but again, we can scale that. It's all about that scalability. From a speed perspective, we can do twice as fast compared to planar. Endurance-wise, we're talking 10x, and power efficiency more than double as efficient as planar NAND. So really disruptive on every single metric. So let's talk about capacity. Again, we can go from single terabyte, coming soon, to 2 terabyte, and there's really no end in sight for how that capacity can increase moving forward. Target applications, ultra-thin laptop, and storage systems, anything that needs high capacity. Now let's look at ultra-high performance. Again, as we go on that interface from SATA to NVMe, 7x improvement from an interface standpoint, and the NAND core will increase double. So again, it's going to be able to take advantage of that new interface as we move into an NVMe era. Target applications, front-end servers, and caching servers, any application that has high performance requirements. Let's talk about endurance now. This is a great story if you think about it, right? Going from planar 2-bit to 3D NAND, that's a 10x improvement. But what's interesting here is if you look at 3D VNAND, the endurance is actually higher than SLC. And remember, SLC was always the gold standard for high endurance. And now 3D VNAND can eclipse even the endurance levels of SLC SSD. Target applications being OLTP, database servers, anything that has a very write-intensive application. It's perfect for VNAND. And ultra-low power, again, compared to a hard drive, we're looking at about a 1/5 power consumption utilizing 3D VNAND. Of course, target applications back to that laptop for battery life, and then wonderful TCO for that data center from an OpEx perspective. So in conclusion, Samsung has been the world's #1 SSD supplier for many, many years. On the PC space, we've had lots of innovations with 3-bit SSD, PCI SSD, and now NVMe SSD. On the data center side, again, very aggressive in driving 3-bit as well as NVMe in the future. And really we want to build upon this foundation and continue that leadership position by utilizing 3D VNAND, which is why we're here today, and we're very excited to talk about it. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for your attention, and I look forward to a very successful conference. 감사합니다. Thank you.